Welcome back to the Automation Podcast. My name is Sean Tierney from the Automation Blog and School. And this week on the show, I meet up with Erik Bonds and Dana Voelker from Schneider Electric to learn all about their TeSys Island line of smart motor starters. Erik and Dana, thank you so much for coming on the Automation Podcast. I'm excited to learn all about these smart motor starters. But before we jump into your presentation, let's just take a moment and introduce you to our audience. And Erik, since you're in control of the slides, let's start with you. Could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Erik Barnes. I work for Schneider Electric, and I've been in the industry for about 22 years now, all centered around motor control. And yes, I'm currently the product manager for our motor control offer for the US. I'll pass it over to Dana and let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Erik. Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Voelker. I'm a marketing manager on the load management team here at Schneider Electric. I've been with Schneider for 18 years and on this motor management team within Power Products for the past year, focused on new product launches and smart motor starters. So happy to be here with you all today. Thank you so much. Back to you, Sean.
Well, thank you both. I'm excited to learn about this product line. I'm going into this not really knowing much about the Schneider line in this area. So let me turn it back over to you, Erik, and why don't you tell us all about this product?
Yeah, sounds great. So, so we're going to talk about our smart motor starter line, which is called TeSys Island, and we're going to cover different areas that are a lot of times customers have questions about. Well, what's different? How is it different? What do I need to consider if I'm going to go from a traditional type of a motor starter to a smart motor starter? So we'll talk about differences in design, differences in how you would install it, how you might program it. And then we'll talk about why. Why would you want to go from a traditional motor starter to a smart motor starter? What does that do for you? What does it do for the customer, the user of the equipment? And so we'll talk about how it improves machine or worker productivity. We'll talk about creating installation, post-installation revenue for the builder of the equipment. And then we'll talk about how it can help achieve sustainability objectives. So why don't we dive right into the first differences in the design? So I'll just kind of quickly orientate you to a traditional motor starter, right? It has a contactor, it has an overload relay, it does the job of switching a motor on and switching a motor off, and it does the job of protecting the motor. If there's too much current going for a longer period of time, then it will trip, right? So it takes the motor offline. And those are the two primary functions, and they've been around for a long time. They've done a great job in doing those functions, but we have so much more opportunity today with data, with using intelligence, and being able to make our machines smarter, so we can work smarter, right? And so our TeSys Island smart motor system, it does have a motor starter, which includes the contactor and the overload relay, but there's some other pieces that come along with it, right? So with the Island system, we have a bus coupler, which is really kind of the data manager. So it's collecting the information from the PLC. It's then interpreting that and then sending commands to the different devices it's connected to, collecting data from the different devices, packaging it back up, sending it back to the PLC. So it's really kind of the coordinator for the whole system and communicating to the PLC. And then we have some accessory modules, which are optional, but you can do things like measure voltage, your power energy consumption. You can add I/O, things like that. And then with the way this is constructed, you can actually have multiple starters. So you maybe have a control panel of like 8 motors you're turning on and off. You can actually tie them all to the same bus coupler and have one system. That's what we call it, an island of motor control. So this does the motor switching, it does the motor overload protection, but it does some other things too. So it's going to be monitoring your loads for the performance. It's going to be monitoring power and energy, quality of that, those voltage supply systems. You're going to get device status to know what's going on, if it's time to replace, or if you're having a communication issue, whatever it might be. And so, there are some differences there and things to think about, and we'll get into a little bit more depth in the future slides there. But there's going to be some additional width, that you're going to have to deal with, because it's you've got communication pieces we've got to add to our system. But you're going to get way more capability.
Yeah, this just for the audio audience, you think about the coupler. It's sitting there on the left-hand side. It's got some RJ45 jacks in it, and it's like the coupler or adapter you would have with any kind of distributed I/O system. And then we're just slapping starters into it and maybe option modules into it, and that's really cool.
Yeah, it's a nice system where you can. It's very modular in its approach, so you can design it for the system you specifically need. And if you need to replace a module, it's just as simple as disconnecting it, putting a new one in, and reconnecting it. And you're good to go. So
Now, I don't want to steal your thunder from future slides, but can I pull out, let's say I have 4 starters. Can I pull out one of the ones in the middle without taking the whole thing apart?
well, the way the TeSys Island system is constructed, you would be disconnecting the bus connection there. So you would need to, it would, you ideally power that off, right? Disconnect it. But the nice thing is you don't need to go through and reconfigure that starter because the configuration lives in the bus coupler. So as long as you put the same
Okay.
part number back in, you just reconnect it and turn it back on, and it's good to go.
That's good. Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
good.
Another question for you, Eric. So can you, as your application or your business might grow, can you add to it? So like add starters and maybe take away starters as you change your
Yeah, absolutely. So
application?
you can set up your configuration. If you need to modify the configuration on the bus coupler, you would just basically tell it, hey, I'm adding 2 starters and here's the sizes they are, and here's what they're doing, their jobs that they're doing. And then it'll start to pull that information. And so you can add or subtract, but you would need to modify the bus coupler's configuration to do that. All right, well, why don't we jump into the next idea or concept? So if you're a design engineer, and you're going to go from traditional to smart motor starters, you may have a few things you got to consider from a layout perspective and from a wiring perspective here. So this is a simple kind of a breaker starter scheme. I've got here, imagine you got 3 starters all connected to a standard circuit breaker, and I'm going to move to a smart motor system. Well, the breakers in this case would stay the same, and the starters are about the same size, but we're going to add a bus coupler. So I'm adding about 2 inches of width. Not a big deal in most panels, very simple to do. So this is a very simple transition. You look at things also like your short circuit current ratings, make sure you're not, dropping that or raising, getting something that's not going to work for you. But in this case here, if you're moving from our traditional TeSys Deca line, this traditional motor starter line, it's good for 65 kA on the smaller sizes, 100 kA on the larger sizes. The island is 85K. So probably in most scenarios, 99% of the scenarios that are out there, that's more than sufficient. So those are things you want to look at, but there's really not a whole lot of difference from a layout perspective in this example. But let's say you're in the mindset, hey, I don't really need a high SCCR solution, and I'm interested in saving on my panels, build time or saving space, and we can potentially do that using a group scheme. So similar as before, I've got, I'm showing on the screen here 3 starters on the left with 3 breakers ahead of them. Now I choose 1 breaker to protect all 3 starters on the smart motor starter side. So, that saves less materials, less wiring. I can use the jumper connectors, the feeder combs to spread power from one starter over to the other ones. So there's some advantages on the wiring savings as well. Now this is a low SCCR solution. So if you don't need a high SCCR solution, this could be an option for you to save. But you really kind of pick up a lot more functionality. Obviously, when you jump from traditional to standard, you just get these other benefits as well. And I'll give you one other quick example, and then we can kind of open up for some questions and discussions on this particular subtopic. But what about if I'm using a type F combination? That's, if you're familiar with our line, that would be like our GV2P manual motor starter with a contactor, like an LC1D TeSys Deca contactor. And that's a very popular design. It's only 2 pieces for the whole circuit. And so we see that a lot. So you moving over to Island in this scenario here, you can have the same basic structure. It's not going to be a type F anymore. So it's a little bit more complicated. You're going to go to more of a group motor arrangement, but the look and feel will be the same, right? So we're going to have the same 2 primary components, a GV type device, manual motor starter, with a TeSys Island motor starter. But you're not able to do some of the connectors. So there's some little nuances in here that this is good information on the screen for you to look at. But in most cases, you're going to be able to achieve a very similar SCCR, short circuit current rating level, You're going to have the same basic functionality from a switching, with a GV manual motor starter device, switching that on and off. But we may just need to transition it to a group motor. So there are some different pathways you can take, and some things to think about, right, as you're transitioning from a traditional motor starter going to a smart motor starter. From a design perspective, some things that you should look at, right? So yeah, it can be done. All right, and let's move on to the next section here. So let's talk about differences in installation. So now we actually were surprised by this. We actually had a customer who gave us this feedback. We weren't really thinking about the smart motor starter as a savings in wiring, but it actually is. So imagine a traditional setup, right? So I've got a PLC. Let's say it's operating. I'm showing a picture showing 5 different motor starters, and so that PLC, we need to have the PLC output, send the wire over and turn the contactor on, but I'm probably going to go through an interposing relay so I don't damage my PLC output. So I've got a wire running to the interposing relay. I've got an interposing relay wire running to the contactor coil to tell it to turn on, pull in. So I've got 2 sets of wires there. And then I need to know, is my contactor pulled in? So I may wire a PLC input to my contactor auxiliary contact to see if is it open or closed. And then I may wire over to my overload relay to see is it tripped or not, right? Because that's information I want to know in my PLC. So I've got potentially 4 sets of wires for every single motor starter, going back to my PLC, right? And so we actually had a customer who had a very big panels. They typically do like agricultural systems, and every job's a little bit different. So it can be 80 starters in the panel. It can be 40. It can be 20. It just varies from job to job. And we asked them, hey, now that you tried TeSys Island, what do you think? And like, well, he was initially interested because of the data, right? He wanted to make his machine smarter, but it's like, I love the fact that it saves me time. And he estimated about 40% of his build time is gone because all those wires go away. It's really just you install TeSys Island to a DIN rail, and then each island has an attached ribbon cable, and it connects to the adjacent port on the adjacent device, and you just click, 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 and then run your communication cable back to your PLC, and there's your control wiring. It's very, very fast. And so this has proven to be a nice time saver, for customers.
Yeah, I mean, it's just huge. Like anything you can put on the field bus on the Ethernet is just, you're saving wires and wires and wires. I'm looking at the picture on the right-hand side, and it looks like each of the motor starters, the intelligence from one to the other is made by a ribbon cable that jumps between one and the other. Is that correct?
Right, exactly. So the ribbon cable all kind of connects to the adjacent device, which then connects back to the bus coupler. So the bus coupler is then communicating through that the ribbon cable to get the information from the starters that it's looking for, and it's also sending those commands that it's receiving from the PLC. So it's kind of coordinating all that back and forth of data.
Okay, so there's like no slice IO in the back behind it. This is all the buses on the front. It looks like it's on the top. Very easy to see.
Exactly, right. And that's what makes it easy if you need to replace one. If it's starter's worn out, time to replace it. You just disconnect your power wires, obviously, and then you disconnect the communication ribbon off the port, pull it out of the port, pop it off the DIN rail, put the new one in, reconnect it, turn it back on. So it saves a lot of time.
Yeah, unlike an IO card, replacing an IO card, I don't see it would be difficult to try to replace one of these starters. I know you can't, but I'm just saying trying to replace a starter without taking the panel down. I don't. I'll let the electricians chime in on that, but I don't know if I would want to touch that with a 10-foot
Yeah, we
pole.
would definitely obviously recommend do safe electrical work practices, but the key here is that
absolutely.
What is the downtime, right? So to do a traditional starter, to make a replacement, may take a little bit longer because all the wire connections, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Versus this one, we could turn down and turn it off, and then our total downtime would be lower, right?
Yeah, like Erik said, the feedback we're getting from system integrators and OEMs is that they really just love going from all of these wires to just one ribbon cable, click and go. It's saving them significant amounts of time on wiring and installation, and they're just standardizing on TeSys Island for that main reason, that it's saving them so much time to build these panels, because they can just use this one ribbon cable, click and go. So they're avoiding that whole wiring situation that can sometimes turn into a mess. I've seen some pictures. And so this kind of cleans it up, and also it's providing less points of failure. So some of the system integrators have said it's saving them between 25 to 40% time savings in that wiring and installation. And they're standardizing usually like for when they have a situation with 6 starters and above, they're just standardizing and moving to TeSys Island. So that one ribbon cable is proving to be a very strong benefit for our partners.
Think about like a system integrator. The time is money, right? So the more time they spend wiring a panel, they're paying somebody to do that. The more time that they're working on installation or they're working on a project, the less the more the later they can start on the next one, right? So this really is kind of a productivity gain, not only just to managing costs, but it really helps system integrators who have job to jobs very different, right? It's not very repeatable. It saves a lot of time in that arena, and you just move on to the next job, the next opportunity, and you send that invoice or you got the job complete to the customer, and it helps with the financials as well.
Well, and I would love to hear what the audience thinks, but from my perspective, I like the fact that I don't have a separate Ethernet jack on every starter. That I don't have to daisy chain from one starter to another starter to another starter. I'm landing my connection here, my field bus right into the coupler, and I'm getting multiple starters. And it's one drop on the network versus having to go to every single one. So I like that. It makes the starter more like a rack of I/O. And of course, the next question I have coming up is, well, what's the limits? How many starters can I put on one of these couplers?
Right. So it does depend on what your configuration is. So we go up to 40 horsepower. There's basically 2 frame sizes. So
Mhm.
we power the coils on the contactors through the ribbon cable, right? So you're not having to deal with
Okay.
that wiring. So if you have all 40 horsepower starters, you're going to be limited to a certain number, maybe let's say like 8. But if you have, smaller sizes, you can do more, right? So we have a configurator online. So if you just do a search for
Okay.
TeSys Island or go to se.com, search TeSys Island, there's a product selector link on our product page. Just click on that and you can just build it and it'll tell you when you get there, but it can be up to 22 devices. And you can add the optional IO, that counts as a device. A voltage module counts as a device. So it'll help you configure it. But and if you need more, you would just create another island, start a new island, and it's just daisy chaining them together.
Okay, that makes sense. So, all right, that makes a lot of sense.
So you mentioned the PLC. It's actually kind of a good lead into our next option here, or next the difference, right? And that's how you interact with a PLC. So the point you made about not having to connect individual communication cables to every single starter,
Mhm.
that actually is another kind of benefit as well. And that is, from what I understand, that if you have a bunch of IP addresses, right, the more IP addresses you add, that sometimes means you have to upgrade to the next tier of PLC to be able to process that, right? So
Yes,
with
yes.
Island, it's one IP address per island, right? So you can have up to 22 devices with one IP address. So that could help you potentially save on your PLC complexity, right? And maybe PLC cost. But there's other PLC differences too. So think about like we use macros a lot. So if you have like an Excel program, you might create a macro just to quickly be able to do a specific function, repeatable over and over again. And when it comes to programming circuits for motor control, it's a very similar structure, right? A reversing starter looks very similar to another reversing starter, a non-reversing, to another non-reversing, and there's different is instead of basically repeating that process every single time for every single starter in the PLC, we've created what we call avatars. So avatars. Dana actually is a pretty good example here. Do you want to kind of give an example of what is
Yes.
an avatar?
Yes, I'm gonna oversimplifying this. So, in my mind, when I think of the avatar, it's kind of like an app on your phone. So you're choosing an avatar, you're choosing one of these little apps to do something. So to do a specific command for you. So that's how I kind of think of them, just like little apps.
Yeah, it's like you're basically saying this motor starter, here's its job, right? You're going to operate a pump, right? And the next motor starter, you're operating a safety circuit as with a seal rating, you know, and it's a forward reverse situation, right? So you're basically identifying an identity, right? You're giving identity to each one of these starters, and so that does a couple of things for us. One, we bake that logic of how, the ladder logic of how that's supposed to operate in the bus coupler. So you configure the bus coupler saying starter number one is running a pump. Well, all that logic's in there, and so what that means on the PLC side is you're just basically giving run commands, function blocks, right? So you're saying, you know, run forward, run reverse. It simplifies on that end, and then it's easier to collect that data out on the PLC side. So that's one benefit of simplifying your PLC ladder logic. But then, you know, two, if we know it's a pump, well, there's certain types of protections that you would want on your pump, right? But let's say if it's a resistive load, well, then there's certain types of protections you want, some you don't want. So we also kind of automatically configure some of the kind of preset some of the settings. And if you want to go in and change it, you can, obviously. But it's just saving you that concept, or saving you that time by giving the ability to give a job or an identity to each starter using the avatars. So it's kind of a neat concept.
Could you, just for the folks who may be walking the dog or working on the car or driving to work and can't see the screen, could you go through those? I'm guessing at what those symbols are for the avatars, but looks like there's 6 of them. Could you go through those?
Yeah, and this actually is just 6 out of, we've probably got 40 total. But
Oh, wow.
so yeah, it's from very, very, let's say, kind of bland or basic. So you could just say this is a switch. It's even though it's the same motor start, same hardware. You could say your job is just a switch. You're not really protecting a motor. You're just turning on and off. You're opening and closing a circuit. We don't know what it is, right? And then you can go one level deeper. You can say, well, you are a forward reverse motor starter combo, right? So it's going to be set up in a reversing starter type tradition, with one being the forward, one being the reverse, but the logic's already baked in. And then you can go even one step further. You could say you're a conveyor of, you know, forward reverse situation. So you can then now we know, like, because you told me it's a conveyor, I know exactly certain types of protections that you may want, right? So and there's different versions for like machine safety. We have, these are seal rated starters, so we can provide you baked in a seal rating on the starter, and you can tell it by the avatar what its job is, what it's doing, and what level you want. So there's different complexities and different levels, and you just choose the identity of what you want the starter to do.
Yeah, just for the audience who's listening, it looks like there's a pump one. It looks like there's a,
yeah.
Is that a heater? It looks like a heater.
So there's a resistive load, right? Yeah.
A resistive load. I'm sorry.
Resistive load. There's conveyor one. There's you know, just a generic like forward non-reversing motor, reversing motor. You know, we have different ones for like speed control, like 2-speed controls. You know, there's different kinds. So there's about 40 different options.
That's pretty amazing. Now, I want to point out something too here on the slide that I found interesting. We all know Schneider has a line of PLCs and PACs. We've had some of your experts on talking about both lines. And but here on this slide, it says you also integrate with Studio 5000 or TIA Portal. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we want to make it easy for customers, and we know certain customers, they already have an automation platform that they use, and they're just going to be really rigid with that. And so we wanted to make it a little bit easier for system integrators or OEMs to be able to still work with their customers, but be able to use TeSys Island. So we have you know, created the backbone, if you will, to integrate with Rockwell and with Siemens through their automation platforms. And so essentially the way that works is after you configure Island in our software, you'll have a downloadable file that you can then upload into those platforms. You'll be able to then leverage the function blocks. It'll be able to recognize what the Island is, what the parts are inside of it, and it'll be much easier to integrate into those software packages.
That's very cool. Now, let's talk about the coupler. Is that Ethernet IP? Is it Profinet? What is it?
Yeah, good question. So we have 3 bus coupler options. The first one is Ethernet IP Modbus TCP/1. And we have a Profinet and we have a Profibus. So that makes it the third one. Yeah.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Yeah. So you have Ethernet IP and Modbus TCP in one?
Yes, all combined into one. Exactly.
That's great.
Right. Yep.
That's great. Amazing.
And just to add to this, so as I've been talking to our partners and trying to, getting their feedback on TeSys Island, this was another huge benefit. So in addition to, loving that one ribbon cable, replacing all the wiring and saving them time, this is the second biggest benefit, is just the time that they're saving in programming and writing that ladder logic. It's cut down significantly. So one of the integrators I talked to said this was saving him hours, and he couldn't stop talking enough about how much the programming the time was cut down. So that's another huge benefit here. It's going to save a ton of time programming, which I'm sure
Yeah.
everyone appreciates.
Yeah, and it's difficult if you are an expert at Studio 5000 or TIA Portal or EcoStructure or MailSec or any of these programming languages, CodeSys. It really is not easy to go from one to the other, and I say that as somebody who's done this a few different times. For we get samples in and we try out different PLCs, and it is a struggle after if you know something really well to try to learn something new. And so I can see people saying, look, a motor starter is a motor starter. We can use this motor starter system, the TeSys, and we can use this no matter what PLC if you're an OEM, no matter what PLC they ask for, we can just stay with the same starters. And I think that's a huge benefit because trying to get that end user to change, having gone through the pain myself trying to learn all these different PLCs, I can see that would be an uphill battle.
Yeah, definitely. So we want to make it very friendly for customers to be able to implement, right? And not just say, no, you got to use Schneider PLCs. We want the Schneider PLC for sure. We definitely welcome that, but we understand reality and some of the limitations out there. So we spent some time talking about the differences. Now let's talk about the why. So, the main reason, why would you want to move from a traditional to a motor starter? Well, we're hearing all the time that there's labor constraints, that we've got an aging workforce. We've got a lot of experts that know how to maintain equipment or operate equipment, and they're retiring. And so who's going to do that job, right? And we think about, we don't think about this solution here as really it could be that missing worker that we can't seem to hire, or we can't get trained in time. So think about using data as an employee, put it to work for you, right? So imagine, and what the beauty of the TeSys Island is that we can set up alarms. So you can have kind of a normal operation, when a pump turns on, it's got kind of a normal zone the current operates in. And if it ever gets too high or too low, or it sends a jam signal, we can detect that. And so we can let you know it's either, hey, everything looks good, running great, or hey, this thing's current's dropped significantly, let's call maintenance. Or maybe it's in some cases we may want to alert the operator, turn the machine off or turn something else on, right? So it's really, think about if you could make data work for you, right? This is a great way to do that without having to hire somebody to sit there and look at a machine and make sure it's not needing attention, or it's not make sure it's operating like it's supposed to.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think all the listeners are probably aware of how much benefit there is to having let's say a VFD on the Ethernet network, right? Because as soon as networks became available for VFDs, everybody was jumping towards that because of the wiring and because of all the information you can get out of it. And so now we're saying, well, you can now do that with the starters as well. And you'll have some people who won't want to change, but I mean, the same reason we're using distributed I/O and we're using VFDs on networks, it makes sense to now put your starters on there too, because, and this gets to condition monitoring and just, being able to alarm on certain conditions where, it used to be, you just know it tripped. It either tripped or it didn't trip, but now you're providing so much more information. That's pretty awesome.
Exactly right.
Yep. Instead of somebody having to look at the equipment and seeing if it's working or not working and having maintenance based on a schedule, they can look at this data that we're getting from the equipment wherever it is, and they can know more about what's happening. If it's a conveyor and it's has too much of a load on there, and it would be, they can be made aware that a stoppage is going to happen before it actually happens. So having that extra layer of visibility. And also, like Erik mentioned, labor in short supply, or we have, people retiring. That's what I'm hearing a lot.
Yeah.
Even at Schneider, everyone's retiring in the industry, and the new people are coming on, and they're expecting the technology to be advanced that they're working with. They're expecting to be able to see data and have it available on their phone, and be able to see it anywhere, anytime. And so TeSys Island is providing that layer of visibility for them.
It's like I said earlier, it's like getting a additional worker, adding to your workforce for free. You're baking it in. Somebody's just constantly monitoring your system, but it's baked into the solution. So it's a really cool concept. And we've got several customers in different applications that are leveraging this. The one that comes to mind, the most recent, is actually kind of in our back door, our backyard here in Raleigh. They make grounding rods, and the problem they have is that it pumps chemicals and things in it as they electroplate and different things along this big long run. And what happens is if the barrel runs dry, if the pump stops working, which does happen, they don't know about it until the very end when they got all this product that's now non-conforming, right? So, and it's a big process to remove all it, clean all that stuff up. And so, this is a very simple concept here. We could say, look, pumps, I told it to turn on, I don't see any current. It's a very simple concept that it's almost like hiring somebody to stand there and look at the pump, right? But you can do it with your machine. It's a really cool concept, and the capabilities are really kind of endless on this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Another good example of an application is like in water, wastewater, right? So we have those remote pump and lift stations that, someone might have to routinely drive hours away to go physically check on it. Where now with TeSys Island, they, can see what's going on remotely. So it can save hours of time driving one trip out to drive out there to that site to check on it, and then realize something's wrong, and then they might need to go get other equipment to fix it. Now you can kind of have that visibility, and make a trip prepared with whatever needs, whatever you might need if that's the case. So definitely
Yeah,
saving time as well there.
absolutely. It's a huge productivity gain, right? And we got to figure out as a workforce, how do we work smarter, and how do we enable our workforce to work smarter, right? Given the right tools. The next thing we talk about is, imagine you're the system integrator. You've got this project, you built this panel, you've got to now install it, you got to commission it, and maybe you want to also quickly troubleshoot it. Well, with having a smart motor starter, you're going to get several additional pieces of help in this area, right? So one is we give you status LEDs. So let's say one of the starters, is sensing an alarm. You're going to be able to see that on the LED on the surface, that this is the starter and it's flashing, it's seeing an alarm. Maybe it hasn't tripped yet, but it's seeing an alarm. Or maybe there's a communication error and you know which one it is, you quickly swap it out. So the status LEDs help you from a local perspective. But also inside the bus coupler, we have built in what we call an operation and maintenance tool, the OMT. And so all you need to do is connect to the bus coupler. You could have your laptop there, connect to it, or it could be something that you could remote in and you could connect to the bus coupler. And then when you connect to the bus coupler webpage, you'll be able to see all kinds of information. You'll see the configuration, you'll see its status. You'll be able to see, the trip. Let's say there was a trip history, a tripping incident. You can look at the history and see why did it trip. You can see was there a voltage swell. All this data is available to you. And let's just say, for instance, you've installed it, it was working fine, but now it's kind of nuisance tripping, and you're the system integrator. You got to get this thing up and running. You could potentially remote in. You can look at the fault history, say, oh man, it looks like it's nuisance tripping. You talk to somebody there, like, yeah, it's running fine. There's not a problem. You say, well, it's set too sensitive. I see the problem now. So you actually, through the OMT, you can actually go to the setting, change that sensitivity on that particular alarm you're looking at, and save it right there. You don't have to physically be present, and it's done, right? You don't have to mess with the PLC programming. So that ability to troubleshoot, to be able to analyze, to see what's going on is absolutely huge. It really enables a lot of capability, not only for the builder and the installer of the equipment, but also, potentially for the user of the equipment as well. And then let's look at another avenue here. So another why would you move from traditional to more of a smart motor starter system would be a post-installation revenue. So I mentioned earlier, with all the expertise that's retiring, where they've worked hard a long time and now they're at a retirement age. What does the end user do? That person's not there. They knew how to run the equipment. What do we do? They're having trouble finding somebody. They're having trouble training somebody. Well, imagine it's a huge vacuum that's being created right now. And
Mhm.
who knows the machine better than the designer and the builder of the machine, right? So this is a great opportunity actually for OEMs that builds machines, for system integrators that builds these types of equipment. They could actually be monitoring this equipment that they built. They understand, they know how it works. They can monitor that for the end user from a remote location. And that could be, there's a lot of cost benefit to doing that versus hiring somebody to always have to go check machine after machine. You can do all this from your office, right? Which is pretty amazing. And then think about, let's say we sense that, hey, this pump is showing signs of wear. We need to go and do maintenance on the pump, or we need to replace the pump. Again, a great opportunity for the OEM or for the system integrator to provide that service, not only the monitor, but they actually can sell the replacement parts and or do the installation as well. So, as a lot of these types of equipment, they're very cyclical, right? We get in waves where the market booms and they're just busy and they can't keep up with the demand, and then it slows down and then like, oh man, we don't have enough orders. And so it's very up and down for some industries on the machine production and the revenue it brings for the companies. This is a great way for companies to kind of level set that a little bit. So you still build the machines in the boom times, but you've got a kind of a steady stream of monitoring service income, of repair service income, replacement part income, and it really can help these OEMs and system integrators solve this problem that end users have, where they don't have the expertise to keep the machines running anymore. So it's a great opportunity.
I'm also thinking about the maintenance staff, and some of these facilities are just massive, and
Hmm.
some of them are multiple floors. And you'll get the maintenance or engineering staff, they'll get a call from the line saying, "Hey, such as such doesn't work," and the last thing they want to do is spend 10 minutes walking down this for it to be a false alarm. So being able to pull this up, and a lot of the guys, they'll be pulling up the PLC code, automatically as soon as they get the call. But being able to go right into the motor starter and see what it's saying is just another advantage and another point of, if it was just a, standard starter, all you would know of is did the PLC command it to start or not. But here you'll get all the other information right from the starter, like you would with a VFD. You'd be able to know everything that's going on with it, and maybe save yourself a long trek down to when there's no problem at all. So I think, yes, great remote diagnostics, remote monitoring is awesome, but also just for the own staff, because a lot of people are shorthanded in the maintenance areas and the engineering areas. So that, I think, it also could apply to that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Dana, I think you have an example of a customer that's really applying this.
I was just thinking, it's a great way to strengthen the relationship between the partner, the OEM, the system integrator, and the customer. And I do have one actually that comes to mind, an OEM who they actually have so they started using TeSys Island, and they have a services arm to their business, and they have that there to provide that service for their customers and to strengthen their relationship and be seen as that trusted partner and advisor and support there for them. And they were another reason they were excited about TeSys Island. They initially started using TeSys Island actually last year when there was the IO shortage. And then they saw all the benefits and the time savings with less wiring and the time it cut down on programming. So they decided to standardize on islands and panels with 6 or more starters. But then they saw that they can actually, help their customers even more by adding TeSys Island to their machines, by being able to again add to their service business model and provide that service for them in the cases where they don't have that maintenance team that can do it, or maybe their maintenance team is limited, or if people are on vacation and they need some extra help, they're there, they can provide those services. So that's the one that comes to mind.
A good example, I actually forgot about that one, but yeah, I was actually thinking of Sonny's Car Wash, which historically car washes have just been, very traditional type of setups or whatever, but Sonny's has a little bit different viewpoint, and they actually published a video on YouTube that you could find. Is look at their smart MCC, and it uses the TeSys Island. And what they're doing is they're serving the investor community. So investors, they're looking for a place. They've got some cash. They want to invest, and the car wash is very happening right now. There's a lot of car washes going up, and it's a great way for you to invest the money in some equipment, and have continual kind of revenue kind of coming in. But these investors aren't maintenance people, right? They're not. They don't want to do the maintenance work. They need it support. So the thing that Sonny's is doing a little bit differently in the marketplace is they're really pushing that, like, hey, we'll build you the MCC, but we'll also monitor. We'll also provide this maintenance support services for you. So it's the market's kind of repositioning itself to really solve some of these challenges that the users tend to be facing. All right, and then the final thing, the final why that we have, why you would want to consider going to a smart motor starter, is a lot of times it's going to help you enable more sustainable objectives, right? So a lot of companies have sustainability objectives that with certain measurements, reduce the energy consumption, reduce the CO2, and so there's a couple ways we do that. One is we reduce the energy waste because by monitoring our energy consumption for the different loads that we have, that's an indicator. Typically, a system needs maintenance. When the energy consumption goes up, it has to work harder or longer to do the same amount of work, right? So that's a good way to know that. Otherwise, with the traditional starter, you just don't know, right? It just runs, and you don't know how much energy it's using. You can't see it by just looking at it. So that's one way. Another way is it uses less power to operate. So the power it needs to pull the coil in, it actually is a very, very efficient motor starter. So it doesn't need as much power to be able to operate, which also saves on heat generation. So that's one of the outputs, the negative outputs you have of a motor starter, is you got to power it to pull the coil in and hold it in, but then it's also creating heat. So that's working against you if you're in an air conditioned space. So those are three quick ways to do it. And then the final way is how we package it, right? So at Schneider, we've done this with not just this offer, but many offers where we've gone to recycled materials like recycled cardboard. We use biodegradable type of inks and things like that. We use less plastics, and then we're starting to put QR codes on everything. So that means less paper printing, right? So and actually a convenience for customers too. I used to run a panel shop for a while, and the first thing you do when you build a panel, you get all your products together, you pull everything out of the boxes, you throw the boxes away, along with the instructions, right? And then you get to the point where you're installing it, you're like, wait a minute, what's the tightening torque on this, or what do I use on this? And like, oh man, where's the box, right? So now you can actually just take your phone out and just scan the QR code, and it pops up with instruction manuals, videos, data, things that you would need to know. So another way, right, we're helping to kind of be more efficient with the resources that we use and help overall achieve sustainability.
Yeah, I have one example to share here. Just for sustainability, we see sustainability metrics coming up a lot in water wastewater applications. So they're required to measure that energy consumption and other sustainability KPIs that TeSys Island can help with. But also there are customers who, consume a ton of energy, and they have to purchase carbon credits. So, we've had customers who have to purchase carbon credits, and, then they realize they need to make somebody within their organization a sustainability director, right? And so we've had those kind of people reach out to us, Schneider Electric, as a consultant to help them figure out how they can measure their energy consumption, so they can have a better handle on those metrics. With sustainability and such a buzzword now, right? And it can mean so many different things, but with it becoming increasingly important and new government regulations, it's important to be able to have a handle on how you can measure your energy and how much energy you're consuming, where and when, and identifying opportunities to be more efficient and to waste less and use less.
Yeah, I mean, waste and pollution are two things I think we can all agree on are things we want to reduce. And you know what, whether you're getting your energy from a legacy fuel source or a current, from solar or wind, or maybe from a next gen source that hasn't even been discovered yet, you're still going to need to turn a motor, and you're still going to need a motor starter to do it. And so the products like these are just so important and will be important, as we go forward. And I want to just throw out there too that, we've had our time to talk about this product. Now, I want to invite the audience to talk back, to get back and let us know what they're thinking about this. Did you like this? Did you not like it? What are some questions maybe you have? Feel free to go to theautomationblog.com/talkback. That is a special form just for the show where you can let us know what you're thinking about this. And, if we get enough of them, we'll put them together and do a little after show. And we'll also, of course, send them on to our awesome guests here, Erik and Dana, and so they'll have your feedback as well. But before we leave, I just want to ask Erik, Dana, was there anything else you wanted to cover today?
Well, I imagine you might have some questions if you're interested in maybe trying a demo, or if you want to buy a TeSys Island and check it out. We have thousands of Schneider Electric authorized distributors, so easily just reach out to them and say, hey, I'm interested in TeSys Island, and they can help you. We also have application experts. If you want some guidance on maybe how you can apply TeSys Island to solve a particular problem, we have experts. So feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to help.
Yeah, that's awesome. And they can even show you how to use that configurator, which will really save you a lot of time. Dana, anything else before we close out the show?
No, I think you covered it. Thank you so much for having us. This was super fun. Look forward to seeing any comments or feedback from your audience, and would be happy to jump on again anytime. This was fun, so thank you.
Well, thank you both for coming on the show. I learned a lot. This looks like a really awesome product, and I hope the audience will. I hope the audience enjoyed it, and I hope they'll talk back to us and tell us what they think. But with that, thank you both for coming on the Automation Podcast.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode, and I want to thank Erik and Dana from Schneider for coming on the show and bringing us up to speed on TeSys Island and their smart motor starters. Really some cool stuff. Now, if you did enjoy this episode, please consider giving us a like and a sub. And if you'd like to follow me or get in touch, you can do so over at automation.locals.com. You'll also find all of my training courses over at theautomationschool.com. With that, I want to wish you all a very happy, safe, and healthy week. And until next time, my friends, peace.